Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. Welcome back to the show. Reverend Carlene Appel joining us here again. Excited to have her today. She's helping so many people, not just in her area, in her state, but worldwide, really. Reverend, would you mind introducing yourself? And I know we're going to have a great conversation today, as we always do.
Hi there. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much.
Good, awesome. So today our show is on grief. Normal, natural process. I'm going to be pulling actually from Good Grief, helping others helping others and ourselves through the hard work of grieving. Trying to read it backwards. I wrote it, so.
That is a difficult thing. I give you credit. Yeah. So the grieving process and bereavement.
So let's go through a little bit of terminology. Bereavement. There's bereavement and grief. So bereavement is to be robbed or deprived suddenly or over a period of time. Period of time would be something, say, like somebody has a form of dementia, like Alzheimer's. And so you're watching a person die over a long period of time. And that's hard. You know, I've worked with people living with dementia since 1985, and I love them. I have fun with them. But you know, it's sad to watch somebody, you know, wither away like that. But, you know, we can help make their lives, you know, good quality. We can give them a good quality life. So I saw a Declaration of Independence for people with dementia, and they said we are not, you know, withering figs or dried up figs, something like that. So wanting dignity. So anyway, grief is a very individual and unique response to loss. Everybody responds differently. One of the things I will say, it's the hardest work you'll ever do, but it's necessary work. Very necessary for restoration of well-being after we have a loss. And it's been said that if our eyes don't weep, our body will somewhere. And that being said, sometimes people, you know, there's cultural expectations when people mourn. It's like if they don't see somebody cry, they say, well, they're really not grieving. Sometimes people don't cry right away. You know, especially people who have to do all the funeral details and the executor of the estate, and you know, they got all this stuff going on. Their loved one has died, and they're in a fog. A very close friend of mine, just last week, her mother died. She didn't quite make 97, but you know. I told her, I said, you know, these days you're going to feel like you're in a fog. I said, but that's normal. Okay. So a lot of times it's dictated by our religious factors too. Like in the Jewish faith, they have sitting Shiva, and that's for, I believe it's for a week. And the mourning period is a year. So it's like after that. But a year, I tell people, you know, the first 2 to 3 years is, I call it the grunt work. And the vision I have is of soldiers in basic training, going through, you know, like underneath the tripwires, going through that mud. So that's that mud and muck, all the different emotions and feelings, and those are all normal, because one minute you're going to be sad, and then if you've been a caregiver, there's like a feeling of relief, and then you feel guilty, and then you know, and it just goes back and forth. And crying comes at, you know, for people who do cry, it comes at different times, or a lot of times it's the most inconvenient times, but I want people to know that grief is normal. Yeah. We live in a society that has, you know, if something hurts, take a pill. If that bothers you, well, then we won't do that. we have to allow people to feel, and I think that's something that's been robbed from the culture, because we want to make everything okay. We want to make pain go away. Pain is there for a reason. Grief is there for a reason. All our emotions, happy, sad, mad, glad, those are all, God gave those all to us for a reason, used properly. Like anger, there's righteous anger, different from just, blowing off steam. But righteous anger is somebody gets hurt and you stand up for them. Somebody gets bullied and you stand up for them. There's righteous anger there. Anger moves us to change. And it's also something that in our brain, our amygdala will have a response, and it's for survival.
Yeah.
But typical attitudes toward loss, it's not accepted well. Like I said, especially in this culture, we want winners, right? Winners, and you see all the now you're seeing all the bookies online there, win big. So we want to be in control, and if you fail, it's like, what did you do wrong? Failure isn't bad, okay?
True.
Yeah. Those fancy Post-it notes you have in your office, that was a failed batch of adhesive. Thomas Edison didn't discover electricity until his 1001st try. Okay.
Yeah. So, very true.
Yeah. Yeah. So Henry Nouwen, who is a very famous and wise priest, he says, devoid of care, our society makes us believe that we are what we have, what we do, or what people think of us. And so this attitude carries over in the way we grieve in the United States. So we're a death-denying society. Again, if something bothers you, take a pill. If you don't want to do that, that's okay. Well, that's not okay. You have to be able to experience all those emotions. So even most devoutly religious people fear death, because there's that mystery. And I mean, I've been over 15 years hospice, so I've been with a lot of people as they died. I have Vietnam veteran who I spent time with because he was afraid, though he's a man of deep faith. So, it's that unknowing. I guess Woody Allen put it best. He says, I'm not afraid of dying. I just don't want to be there when it happens. So,
yeah.
So we also use death-denying expressions. Well, he passed away. Where'd he go? Is he coming back?
Wow.
Grandma's sleeping. You never tell a kid that somebody who's died is sleeping, because
that's confusing.
They're very literal. Okay, if I go to sleep, am I going to wake up? So anyway, our first impulse is to make it go away. And Henry Nouwen again, he said, our tendency is to run away from the painful realities or try to change them as soon as possible. And in fact, we feel quite uncomfortable with an invitation to enter into someone's grief before doing something about it. Yep. We have to learn to be, when you're with a bereaved person, it'd be nice if you just sat there with them, hold their hand. Yeah. Can I get you a cup of coffee? We have time limits, get over it, after a year, have you gotten over it? Why don't you move on, like it was a broken leg, Yeah. And so when you're saying that, you're treating that grief-stricken person the way we treat horses with broken legs. What do? We shoot them down, right? So, absenteeism. Well, I think that's changing now. Absenteeism in the U.S. now, we have family leave and things, but generally a funeral time, you get 3 days. Yeah. And only the immediate family. And so for the first 72 hours after the death of a loved one, they're in shock. And so we have people in very dangerous positions who are dealing with griefs, like an airline pilot, like a surgeon, a mechanic, a nurse, school bus driver, air traffic controller. I don't think we want them to be numb, but so, and people avoid the survivor, because people who have relatives, and I hear this over and over again, it's like, yeah, nobody calls me anymore. My husband and I, or my wife and I, we used to go meet with these couples, and now all of a sudden you're kind of out of the group. And sometimes, people want to sue. They're actually trying to self-sue. And I try to educate on things that aren't really good to say. So like, it was meant to be, at least she's not suffering anymore. It's okay for the bereaved to say that, but it's not okay for people to come up and say that
too. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, he's better off where he is now. Really? Was it that bad?
Yeah.
And the worst one is, it's like, it was the will of God. It's like, what? What about the misuse of human free will, like driving drunk?
Yeah.
God didn't do that. God didn't force a drink down somebody's mouth, that's it, free will. And then we have people saying, oh, is there destiny or fate? That's definitely for Aristotelian. That's Eastern type philosophy,
Mm-hmm.
So, God must have needed another angel. Theologically, that's incorrect. People are not angels. Angels are separate beings, biblically. So for those of you out there who think we get our wings, angels are created beings. We don't become angels, okay?
Yeah.
And especially like if loss of a child, that's a hard thing when you lose a child.
Yeah.
That's I had 2 miscarriages, and the second one, I was so bitter for a long time. And God brought something out of the ashes, because when I was in seminary and I was doing hospital chaplaincy, I would go and comfort the couples who delivered a stillbirth. So the youngest baby I held actually was 18 and a half weeks, translucent skin, but what I did was I had the baby in the blanket, and I talked to the baby. As the baby was the most important person in that room. And I asked the couple, do you have a name? And so I would use the name, and then after I prayed for the baby, I would hand over the baby to the parents so they could spend some time. Yep. And especially this is one I heard, you can have a dozen more.
Mm-hmm.
I heard that 11 hours after my first miscarriage. And then I got in trouble because they said I was insensitive. I said, this one was a baby, okay? And then some people say, well, was it really a baby? Anyway, yes, it was, and then the best one, you got to be strong. Strong for who?
Yeah.
With some cultures, okay, because there's cultural differences in grieving, and you really do have to be aware of those if you're working with grieving families. Some cultures that's useful, but not ours. Okay, the other cultures maybe. So why do people say these things? Oh, we're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Around that person. So we try to soothe. It's really, we're trying to soothe ourselves. So kind of like saying to a starving person, I'll pray for you to get food, and you walk away patting yourself on the back. Well, I did a good thing, I did something. I told them I was going to pray for them.
Yeah.
And so the result is that grieving person feels alienated from everybody else and from God. So the starving person is still starving and now feels abandoned. So you walked away from their need, and because you brought God into the picture, well, God walked away too. So the specific type of losses, we have the near uncertain, it's imminent, so you can't hide, you can't put it off, so you know it's going to happen. We have the near and uncertain, like violence and cardiac arrest, car accident, drunk, murder. It's near, but we don't know it.
Yeah.
Near and certain, but averted. A person comes out of a code blue. They
Yeah.
survive a tragedy. So they have a new look, distorted hopes. Now that's if they don't have cardiac arrest. You could survive a heart attack, but not cardiac arrest. So
Yeah.
And I've heard people, I've heard this said, well, you know, you can just give them CPR and it'll be fine. And I had to tell one person, no, they're not. You know, they might come back 0 to 10%. You know, so chest compression, sore chest, broken ribs, collapsed lung, and most people who need CPR will also need to be on a mechanical ventilator, in intensive care, because they have to support their breathing. Fewer than 10% of all hospitalized patients survive CPR and return to their previous state. Most of these people were already, you know, they had coronary artery disease, so they were in a coronary care unit when it was done. So somebody might live for a short period after, but they still die in the hospital. So only 1 to 4% of patients with multiple chronic illnesses survive to leave the hospital. Almost no one with cancer survives to leave the hospital.
Yeah.
And those who do survive may continue to live in a weaker state or with brain damage. So half the people who do survive are chronically dependent, you know, or they may not have, you know, they may be, their brain's not sending signals anymore. So there's brain death. So then we have distant and certain. So family disease that one chooses to ignore, or believing death is an option. And I know people like this, they, you know, they think they can do what they want. Nobody tells them what to do, but then their body eventually, you know, they don't take care of themselves. Eventually the body does, it does protest, you know, so in a big way, you know. So, and the distant and uncertain. So this is the teenage attitude, because they've got a surplus of dopamine and norepinephrine. Those are the things that make them do risky behaviors and not think about things. So, so it's like, I don't do that stuff. So, and for them, like future might be the pepperelli coming at 3 o'clock. Okay, that's the future. I remember hearing a teenager say, oh, I'm going to be 21. I'm going to be so old. Oh, and I was thinking, oh, honey, what are you going to do when you're 30?
It's so true, right? Exactly.
Yeah. So, and then we have suicide. And I teach in that, and I've also done interventions. That what the person really wanted to die is the pain. They were at a low point, such a low point that it looked like they were out of options. And so when I work with a suicidal person, I want to know, so let's talk about it. Tell me, and I'll say, what's the one thing that would make you change your mind and make another choice? And that kind of throws people, because they're waiting for me to say, how come you want to commit suicide? Yeah. But give me one reason that would make you change your mind. So it kind of slows people. It does slow people down. So what you want to do is come alongside of them. And then internal family systems, when we talk about parts, anger and all our emotions, they are protecting a wound. It could be a wound from childhood, but it's been protecting the wound, and it does, you do feel it in different parts of your body. So a suicidal feeling is covering a wound. So when we do IFS, we want to engage the feeling. And so we ask the person to go inside themselves and and what is that feeling saying? It's amazing how IFS works. I had a client once who wrestled with something for a couple of decades, and we did IFS, and the part that was that didn't have to do that job anymore of protecting the wound. He told me that it was like laughter, as it was free, and not had that issue since. So IFS really works, and it's good for people who are traumatized anyway. But there's rage. How could he or she do this to me? Okay, this is the most public of all abandonments. And you've got issues of delusionment. I thought I knew you. Get that emotional investment. I encourage the survivors to tell the deceased how they feel. Yell, scream at the corpse if they want. Get it all out. There's a social stigma. Somebody questioned if your kid commits suicide, people start questioning your competency as a parent. You're unfit, when in fact it had nothing to do with you. It was their choice. Ultimately, and I tell people, if the person suddenly seems better, you better watch them, because that's when they're getting ready to do it. See, they've made peace with their decision. But a lot of people, a person sounds better, gets better, and so they let their guard down. And sometimes it happens because the person has kind of threatened suicide for so long. It's like, the boy who cried wolf. But when they all of a sudden feel better, that's when they're getting really close. So that's when you want to be around them. But part of that stigma shame is actually rooted in history and religion. So early Roman and English laws criminalized suicide. So the person was obviously trying to escape paying taxes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the Bible doesn't really contain any prohibition against suicide, regardless of many ways people like to write that in. But the early Christian church considered suicide to be murder. In Islam, the Quran forbids it. Then you have the should haves, the guilt. I should have done this, and so I say, what do you think you should have done, could have done, would have done? So I want to emphasize that, you're not responsible for someone's behavior, okay? If you feel you did something that pushed them, just own your part. Don't own the whole thing, because they ultimately made that decision, not you. So, but there's anger, so besides at the deceased, at the medical community, why didn't they prevent that? Why didn't they do something? And if the deceased was receiving psychiatric or medical care, they want to know, why couldn't you do anything more? They're mad at God. How could God allow this to happen? Well, I didn't tell them to walk off that, 5th-story balcony. God didn't tell them to do that. But I encourage people, tell God how you feel. God wants you to be honest to God. I will say that, he knows you're angry. He's the only one big enough to handle it. People like, I'm afraid to tell God. Why? What do you think? God's a little being there. So he knows they're angry. So he's the only one big enough to handle all that. So the Psalms have every single emotion in the book in there. And there's even a fish shaking psalm. So it's God's permission giving book. That's why I like the 23rd Psalm is a very popular psalm. I like Psalm 139. It talks about God searching me, know me, you know me, you know where I am. There's nowhere I can go that you can't find me. So, so Jeremiah, my favorite prophet, accused God of enticing, deceiving, overpowering him. It's like a one-night stand. So he cursed the day he was born. It's like, I'm not doing this anymore. So he walks away. And then a few verses later says, this is burning inside of me. I can't stop this. So he was called to deliver a word of God, and he couldn't stop it. So But,
Yeah.
but at least he told God how he felt. God's big enough to handle it,
Mm.
So, and we're sad at ourselves. It's like, why wasn't I there? What could I have done? The person who's determined to commit suicide is going to likely accomplish it unless there's some intervention. You can Velcro them to your hip and they will find a way if they're really that determined. But if clues were ignored and missed, it's like like a bad hairdo, all those things you said. So anyway, but so I just, like I said, I encourage them to own their part. But I know we're coming to the end of our program, so I want to encourage people to seek out a grief group or see a counselor like myself. I am certified in grief. Actually been working with it for decades. So anyway, I didn't get through everything I wanted, but it's just kind of a little primer to help people understand death a little better and grieving. So anybody who feels like they can't grieve, Reverend Carlene is giving you permission to grieve. So go for it, because you have to grieve. Your body will weep somewhere if you don't, but if your body, and your body is going to feel this, but if you have heart palpitations or something, please see your doctor. Okay, see your doctor if you've got physical symptoms. Make sure it isn't something else. So I am Reverend Carlene Appel.
Thank you.
New Day I know you're going to ask me that, right?
Exactly. You know how this works already. You're so good.
New Day Pastoral Counseling Services. And I am at www.newdaypcs.org, and I am 630-557-6229. Go on my website. You can contact me there. And Jill, I can't wait till we're doing live shows again. But this is our last live show for now. But fear not, people. Everything's available on all the PBN network channels, Spotify, and all that, Google, and also Roku.
Right. Thank you so much. Right. Okay. Love speaking with you. Thank you again for everything. Have a great day, and to all of our listeners as well.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.